Well, down in the holler where I live, there was a little store right at the foot of Tanner's Ridge Road. The little store was run by a fellow by the name of Tom Bailey. Now, Tom Bailey never locked the basement in his store. There was a door right beside the road, and he kept all of his surplus stuff and his supplies in the basement. And during the Depression, a lot of times people would sneak in, get a bag of flour or potatoes and take off with it, and they always came back and paid him for it. He said he never lost anything. And it was a well-known fact that he never locked his door in the basement. People knew it. Now, Tanner's Ridge, if you don't know what it is, it's a real steep road. It actually runs straight off the mountain. So it's real steep up and down. You better have a good vehicle going up and coming down. Anyway, this family of Taylors ran out of food. And they're sitting around the fireplace after they get the kids in bed, the man and the woman are, and they're worrying. The woman says to her husband, she says, "What are we going to do to feed these kids tomorrow?" And he says, "I don't know, I'll think of something." She gets up in disgust and goes and gets in bed. And just before she goes to sleep, she hears him put on his big heavy overcoat and boots and go out the door. Well, she's awakened right after daylight by him kicking snow off his feet on the porch. She hears him come into the kitchen. She hears him dump something in the flour barrel. He comes in the bedroom and he sits on the end of the bed and takes his shoes off. And he says, "Now, go fix those kids something to eat." Well, she gets up. She goes in the kitchen. He lays down, starts to go to sleep. He's tired. He's wore out. And about the minute he goes to sleep, she comes charging through the door and she's yelling. She said, "You fool," she said. "You've carried a bag of cement all the way back up Tanner's Ridge." He had went down to Tom Bailey's basement in the dark. They didn't have electricity. And he got what he thought was a bag of flour. Back then, they used to put cement and flour in cloth bags. And he carried it all the way back up the ridge. And when he got there, he wasn't a bit better off than he was when he left. That's one of the things that happened. Another story that I've heard a number of times, true story as well, is about Gerd Cave. Now, Gerd Cave was an old Pentecostal minister that was raised down here in Dark Hollow. His right name was Gordon Cave, but everybody slurred it into Gerd and the name stuck. Gerd was moved out of the park in 35, 36, him and all his family that was left. And as a boy, I can remember him out on the streets of Stanley. Everybody would come down out of the hollows to buy groceries on Saturday. Busy day. That's the day everybody came to town. And this place would be packed. And Gerd would go out on the street preaching. He would start up one side of the street, and he'd be yelling and preaching, fire and brimstone, and everybody would run to the other side of the street to get away from him. Well, he'd follow them right across. He'd go right to the other side and go to preaching again. And then they'd all run back. And he'd come right back across and do it again. That was Gerd Cave. Well, Gerd lived down here in Dark Hollow. And in the middle 30s, in the mountains here, diphtheria was going around. And people were not immunized. They didn't get shots. They didn't know what it was. Well, Gerd had a number of children. And one of them got the diphtheria. One night it died. And it was in the middle of winter, of course, a lot of snow, the ground frozen. Next morning, Gerd wraps the body up, and he pushes out through the snow to the cemetery, out on the hill a couple miles away. It takes him all day to dig through the snow, the frozen ground, to bury the body. Tired and wore out, he gets back to the cabin that evening to find another one in the bed, dead. That was a hard life. They lived very, very hard life. I've heard of many, many stories like that. People accepted death in children much better than they do now. My father had 5 brothers and sisters that lived. And he had a sister that died. And my older uncle, and of course all of them are dead now, they died years ago. My older uncle told the story that he remembered as a little boy when the little girl was sick. And his mother, when the little girl was sick, crying and coughing or whatever it was, she threw it down on the bed. And she says, go ahead and die. You're going to die anyway. She accepted fate, what it was. People had a different outlook on it, I think. My father had 3 older sisters. All of them lived to be way up in their 90s. One was 97 or 98 when she died. She lived in Springfield, Illinois, near Springfield. When she was in her early 90s, she was riding through Springfield on a motorcycle. She was tough. The next one lived to be 95, I think, and then the third one lived to be 94. They all never had great medical care. It was the way they lived, healthy life. Work, hard work, good food, fresh food, and they had a good life.